Welcome to Twilight Terror Stories. Twilight is not just the end of day, it's the beginning of something else. A time when the shadows stretch and fear takes its first breath. You've stepped into that moment now, and the stories are waiting. Let them find you. What awaited Elias in the sequestered country house, nestled deep within the folds of slumbering hills, remained entirely beyond his imagining. He sought refuge there, an escape velocity from the constricted dimensions of his city dwelling and the incessant clamor of adjacent lives. Weeks stretched before him, promising untainted air to inhale, space for thoughts to unburden themselves. The blueprint seemed elementary. Quietude, a welcoming hearthroom, a bulwark of fire against the encroaching chill of autumn nights. He arrived under a Thursday sky, the crunch of gravel beneath his tires a small punctuation mark signaling the start of this intended peace. Relaxation, a few simple, satisfying meals, perhaps a book devoured beside the flickering embrace of the fire. These were the modest ambitions coloring his thoughts as he surveyed the weathered facade. But the first intrusion of true cold, that very night, unraveled everything. He crossed the threshold near midday, letting his valise thud onto the wide plank floorboards. A cursory exploration followed. The main room possessed a certain rustic grandeur, dominated by an old, resilient-looking sofa aimed squarely at a colossal stone hearth that clawed its way toward the ceiling. Overhead, thick timber beams crisscrossed the space, emitting faint groans under his footsteps. The kitchen proved compact yet functional. Refrigerator humming faintly, stove awaiting use, a sink positioned beneath a solitary window that framed a dense cluster of skeletal trees. In the bedroom, the scent of dormant textiles, heavy with dust, hung in the air. An aura of disuse permeated the dwelling. Unlatching the wardrobe to stow away a handful of shirts revealed silken strands of arachnid artistry in the shadowed corners. Elias brushed them away with a hesitant hand, mentally banishing images of eight-legged nocturnal patrols. After the rudimentary settling in, a 15-minute drive brought him to the nearest semblance of civilization, a grocery store where he procured tinned soups, sturdy bread, and bottled water. Nearby, a makeshift stall offered stacks of firewood. The vendor, a man whose face seemed carved from the very timber he sold, remarked that the nights here possessed a sharper bite than anticipated, a deceptive chill that belied milder days. Evening descended, and Elias constructed his first fire. Logs arranged, kindling tucked beneath, a struck match coaxing hesitant flames to life. They caught, blossomed, and soon a gentle, percussive crackling filled the room. He settled onto the sofa, a soft throw drawn over his legs, and surrendered to the hypnotic dance. Flames writhed, liquescent and serpentine, casting jittery chiaroscuro across the rough-hewn walls. For a fleeting interval, tranquility brushed against him, a fragile thing against the backdrop of the encroaching night. The city, deadlines, the familiar tightening knot of stress, all receded. Perhaps 20 minutes elapsed before a discordant note disrupted the visual rhythm. The flames contorted, coalescing unnaturally. Elias leaned in, eyes narrowing. For a disorienting second, a simulacrum of a human face flickered within the inferno. Indistinct, yet the suggestion of eyes, the curve of cheekbones, a chin limned by incandescence, was undeniable. His rational mind grasped for explanations, an odd configuration of the logs, a trick of perception. He rubbed his eyes, blinked hard. The apparition dissolved as swiftly as it had materialized. A frisson of cold traced its way down his arms, unrelated to the ambient temperature. His mouth felt suddenly arid. Coincidence, he told himself sternly. Firelight and shadows playing their ancient games. Still, unease lingered. Rising, he fetched a glass, gulping water from the kitchen tap. He returned to the hearth, seized the iron poker, and deliberately disturbed the burning logs, hoping to fracture the pattern, to disrupt whatever accidental geometry had birthed the illusion. The face did not reform. Eventually, the fire waned to glowing embers. He added another log, seeking continued warmth, then curled onto the sofa, drifting into an uneasy doze. He awoke abruptly near 2 a.m, shivering. The fire had dwindled to faint orange pulses within the cavernous hearth. His breath plumed visibly in the frigid air. Pushing himself upright, Elias rubbed warmth back into his arms before carefully rebuilding the pyre. Match flared, tinder caught, nascent flames climbed the fresh wood. He stepped back, watching, his heart thumping with an unfamiliar insistence. He was waiting, he realized with a jolt, waiting to see if the visage would reappear. Initially, the fire burned with innocent vigor, all bright pops and crackles. Then, as his gaze remained fixed, the shape began to coalesce once more. Sharper this time, more defined. The lips seemed to articulate movement, though no sound escaped. A constriction seized his chest. His breathing grew shallow, rapid. The fine hairs on his arms prickled. He blinked repeatedly, convinced it must vanish, but the face held for 5, perhaps 6 seconds, before liquefying back into the general swirl of orange and red. He retreated, legs unsteady beneath him. Grasping for something solid, his hand found a throw pillow, which he clutched against his hammering ribs. A dense, acrid odor emanated from the chimney. Damp soot mingled with stale ash, burning his nostrils. Tendrils of smoke snaked upward, spreading languidly beneath the beamed ceiling, their slow drift almost seeming to trace deliberate patterns along the timber. He fought the urge to scrutinize them too closely. His thoughts scrambled, grappling with the possibility of hallucination induced by fatigue or the unfamiliar surroundings. He rubbed his face vigorously, trying to dispel the phantom image. Sleep in the main room felt impossible now. He retreated to the bedroom, shutting the door firmly behind him, and burrowed under the covers, still fully clothed. His skin felt clammy. His breath hitched. Sleep, when it finally claimed him out of sheer exhaustion, was shallow and fractured, haunted by the memory of fire-born eyes. Morning found him leaden, a knot clenched tight in his stomach, his head throbbing from the deficit of true rest. After dressing and forcing down a slice of dry bread, he threw open all the windows, hoping a thorough airing might purge the lingering scent of smoke and unease. A faint, sooty residue marked the corners of the hearth. He spent considerable time meticulously cleaning out the ashes and debris. The simple chore, a desperate attempt to regain control, to assure himself that the fireplace could be rendered mundane again. His hands trembled slightly as he worked. "Just tired," he insisted inwardly. He dedicated most of the day to the outdoors, exploring the grounds, following a faint trail that disappeared into the woods behind the house. Kicking through fallen leaves beneath ancient oaks, the weak autumn sun warming his shoulders, he managed to achieve a semblance of normalcy for a few hours. But as dusk began to reclaim the landscape, the temperature plummeted anew. Back inside, he stood hesitant before the hearth. He attempted to rationalize, to convince himself that the face was mere pareidolia, his own anxious mind projecting patterns onto chaos. With a resigned sigh, he laid the fire once more, his fingers stiff with reluctance. He lit it, then retreated to the sofa, a vigilant observer. Flames climbed, crackled. For several minutes, all seemed ordinary. Then it returned. The face. It lingered longer this time, its gaze seemingly mobile, sweeping the room. The mouth opened, worked silently, mimicking speech or perhaps a gasp for air, yet the only accompanying sound was the relentless consumption of wood by fire. Elias's hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. A profound weakness invaded his legs. He gripped the sofa arm for support. Every nerve ending felt hyper-alert, the hairs on his nape rigid. His pulse roared in his ears. The smoke resumed its eerie behavior, pooling beneath the ceiling, drifting in slow, deliberate currents along the beams. He backed away instinctively, bumping against the kitchen counter, his eyes locked on the phantasmal display. The face appeared to track his movement. A frantic impulse sent him fumbling beneath the sink for the fire extinguisher. He hefted its cold weight, aimed the nozzle toward the flames, finger hovering near the trigger, poised to douse the apparition. But he hesitated. Some stubborn part of him still craved logical resolution. A blocked flue, an object lodged within the chimney casting strange shadows, yet primal instinct screamed against approaching, against peering into that fiery maw. The face dissolved again, receding into the familiar flicker. He remained frozen by the counter, panting, the adrenaline leaving a metallic taste in his mouth. He slowly lowered the extinguisher, noticing the tremor in his hands, the whiteness of his knuckles. His throat felt raw. Forcing down more water was difficult. The air hung thick with the smell of smoke and an underlying musty fetor he couldn't quite place. He needed to escape the house's oppressive atmosphere. Shrugging on his jacket, grabbing his keys, he fled to the car, his breathing still shallow, chest tight. He drove aimlessly until he found a roadside diner, its fluorescent lights a harsh beacon in the rural darkness. Sliding onto a counter stool, he ordered coffee, then another, trying to anchor himself in the mundane clatter of cutlery and low conversation. His fingers drummed a nervous rhythm on the formica. He studied the faded menu with intense, unseeing focus. Gradually, the frantic hammering in his chest subsided. His shoulders eased fractionally. He stayed for 2 hours, consuming a greasy burger and far too much coffee, delaying the inevitable return. When he finally re-entered the house, it was late, the main room steeped in cold. The hearth held only the faintest glow of dying embers. He sat in the encompassing darkness for a long moment, debating the wisdom of rekindling the fire. His body tensed at the mere thought. The silence felt heavier now, charged. He shivered despite his thick sweater. Leaving seemed the sensible option. Pack hastily, drive through the night back to the city's familiar, impersonal noise. Yet a perverse curiosity warred with his fear. A sliver of him needed to know, to see if the face would manifest again. With trepidation not in his stomach, he lit the fire one final time, standing close, match held ready. As flames took hold, he stepped back, assuming his now familiar position of wary witness. The initial minutes passed without incident. He even nudged the logs with the poker, searching for any natural knot or grain that might remotely resemble features, but found only rough bark and unremarkable fissures. Then, inevitably, it began. The face bloomed in the heart of the fire, seemingly pressing outward this time, striving to breach the fiery curtain. The lips parted, cheeks hollowed as if drawing a desperate, soundless breath. Only the hiss and crackle of combustion filled the air. Vertigo washed over Elias. His head pounded, the room seemed to tilt. He fought against the rising tide of panic, forcing his eyes to remain open, fixed on the harrowing sight. His hand shook uncontrollably. Breath sawed in and out of his lungs in ragged gasps. A bead of sweat traced a cold path down his temple, despite the room's chill. The expression on the fiery visage was one of pure torment. He felt an empathetic pressure in his own chest, an irrational sense of being drawn toward the heat, toward the anguish. A tingling numbness spread through his hands. Inhaling sharply through his nose, he caught that thick, smoky aroma again, underscored by the persistent mustiness from the chimney. Then he registered the smoke's aberrant behavior more clearly. It wasn't merely rising, it was spilling into the room, hovering near the ceiling in thin, coiling ribbons, gathering in the corners like a creeping miasma. His eyes stung. Each breath felt insufficient, labored. A cough rattled in his chest. Stumbling backward, he fumbled for the window latch, wrenched it open. A blast of frigid night air rushed in. He gulped it down, his vision blurring momentarily. Blinking rapidly, he spun back toward the fireplace. The face was gone. The flames burned with ordinary ferocity, the smoke now drafting correctly up the chimney. He collapsed onto the sofa, profoundly shaken, struggling to reconcile what he had witnessed. His heartbeat thudded a heavy rhythm against his ribs. Despite the open window, the air felt stagnant, heavy. The soft crackle from the hearth and the occasional groan of the old timbers overhead were the only sounds. He remained there for over an hour, too frightened to seek his bed, too exhausted to pace. Every trivial noise made him flinch. His gaze kept darting back to the fireplace, half expecting the face's return. It did not reappear. As the logs crumbled to ash and the heat dissipated, he pulled an extra blanket around himself and finally succumbed to a fitful sleep on the sofa. The window left ajar. Rest was punctuated by sudden, gasping awakenings. Once, he thought he heard a faint whisper, but opening his eyes revealed only silence, save for the measured tick of the kitchen clock. In the days that followed, Elias experimented, desperate for control. He located a long-handled brush in the shed and scrubbed the chimney flue, dislodging clouds of soot and debris. He called a local chimney sweep service, only to be told the wait was over a week. He purchased new firewood from a different source, wondering if the original logs held some peculiar property. Yet, the phenomenon persisted. Each time he lit the fire, the face materialized at least once. Its appearances grew longer, the silent mouthing more frantic, more pleading. No voice ever reached him, only that profound, voiceless anguish. The smoke continued its strange, low-drifting dance before eventually succumbing to the chimney's draw. One afternoon, he attempted documentation, setting his phone on a nearby chair, aimed at the hearth, recording. Reviewing the footage yielded nothing but indistinct flares and the normal undulation of flames. The face remained elusive to the electronic eye, a subjective horror. What he saw so plainly in person resolved into mere flickers on screen, easily dismissed. Night after night, he dragged himself to bed depleted, the phantom weight of stale air settling in his lungs. Questions swirled, unanswerable. He refrained from confiding in anyone. Their predictable counsel, return to the city, seek professional help, felt inadequate, dismissive of the visceral reality in his experience. A stubborn core within him yearned for understanding, for an explanation that didn't predicate his own mental unraveling. The house itself began to feel claustrophobic, the persistent scent of old smoke impregnating everything, clinging to his clothes, his skin. Sleep offered little respite. He awoke each morning slicked with sweat, his muscles perpetually taut. Excursions for supplies became exercises in paranoia. He scanned the faces of strangers, wondering if his internal turmoil was visible, if his haunted eyes gave him away. No one seemed to notice. His reflection in shop windows showed only deepening shadows beneath his eyes, a permanent crease of worry etched between his brows. He lived in a state of constant anticipation, bracing for an escalation that never arrived. The face appeared, conveyed its silent suffering, and vanished. Its power lay not in overt aggression, but in its relentless, unnerving presence, slowly eroding his composure. Curiosity warred with self-preservation, but eventually the latter gained ground. After nearly 2 weeks, the strain became unbearable. His nerves felt frayed to the point of snapping. His body ached with unrelieved tension. One crisp morning, he gathered his belongings with methodical haste, loaded the car, and locked the heavy oak door behind him. A final glance into the main room revealed the cold, empty hearth, the air still feeling thick, watchful. He turned away without ceremony, started the engine, and drove, putting miles between himself and the sequestered house. He tries, even now, to purge the memory, the way the face had strained within the flames, the unsettling drift of the smoke beneath the ancient beams. But it remains lodged fast in his mind. Sometimes, lighting a simple candle in his own apartment triggers a reflexive pause, a moment of tense expectation. Nothing ever appears, yet the feeling persists. A sense of being observed, a presence just outside his peripheral vision. He dwells at times on the silent movement of those fiery lips, forever shaping words he could not hear. What message was trapped within that inferno? He never discovered its meaning, and a significant part of him harbors no desire to. He knows only this: he will never return to that house, and the simple comfort of a fireplace has been irrevocably tainted by the memory of spectral eyes staring back from the flickering heart of the blaze. A ragged scrape, metal biting metal, yanked me from the shallow grave of sleep. My pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Darkness pressed thick and close, the kind that pools in forgotten corners. 3:04 a.m. glowed the phone's cold eye. My mouth was a desert. The air tasted of ghosts of cigarettes and time decaying. This room, this scab on the edge of town, had become my reluctant sanctuary 2 nights prior, a refuge sought when my own key became a stranger to its lock. Now, Cocooned beneath a threadbare, abrasive blanket in this cramped space of peeling paint, I lay utterly still, every nerve straining to listen. The door shuddered, once, twice. Then the handle depressed with a drawn-out, arthritic squeal. But I'd secured it, double-secured it, employing the flimsy chain and the tarnished brass bolt, small acts of defiance against the encroaching night. My left hand, a traitorous tremor running through it, fumbled across the nightstand, fingers closing around a half-drained bottle of water. I gripped it, a useless talisman. Though the overhead light remained dormant, a sickly neon wash bled through the window from the motel's stuttering sign, painting the room in bruised light. It sculpted the door's silhouette, the landscape of the worn carpet, the hulking wardrobe crowned by a tall, freestanding mirror. That mirror, leaning precariously in the corner, always felt like an interloper, warping the room's reflection into unsettling geometries. Even veiled in shadow, it pricked at my unease. Slowly, deliberately, I drew breath through my nose, hoarding the silence. My heart's frantic drumming seemed loud enough to wake the dead. The handle ceased its turning. Silence flooded back, broken only by the distant drone of unseen highways and the intermittent pop of the ancient mini-fridge sighing in its sleep. Minutes stretched taut. When the vise around my chest loosened its grip, I risked another glance at my phone. 3:07 a.m. A raw ache bloomed in my throat. Had I dreamt the sound? Conjured it from sleep-deprived paranoia? No. The certainty settled cold and heavy in my gut. The key had been real. Sleep had been a scarce commodity since my arrival. This intrusion felt different, sharp-edged. Swinging my legs out of bed, I rose with painstaking care, willing the protesting springs beneath me into silence. The carpet's coarse weave bit into my bare soles. I crept towards the door, pressing my ear flat against the cool, chipped paint. Nothing stirred beyond the threshold. A void. With a flick of a switch, the bedside lamp cast a weak, jaundiced glow, illuminating the door exactly as I'd left it. Bolt shot home, chain securely nested in its channel. A tentative tug confirmed its steadfastness. A wave of confusion, sharp with lingering dread, washed over me. I turned, my gaze snagging inevitably on a mirror. A chill, unrelated to the room's erratic climate control, traced its way down my spine. The mirror was immense, its frame intricately carved with what looked like blighted flora, shapes worn smooth by time or perhaps seared by some forgotten heat. It exhaled a faint, dry scent. Dust, age, something indefinable. I'd avoided meeting my own gaze in its depths these past days. The reflection always seemed to lag, trailing reality by a disconcerting half-beat, like watching a poorly synced video feed. But now, standing frozen, I registered a discrepancy. The reflection of the door. The chain within the glass hung lower, slacker than the actual chain. I blinked, leaned closer. A trick of the light, an illusion born of fatigue and the mirror's inherent distortion. Running a hand through my damp hair, feeling the sweat slick at my nape, I retreated to the dubious safety of the bed. Sleep remained elusive. Until dawn painted the sky in shades of bruised plum, I lay listening, my heart a muffled drum counting out the empty seconds. Morning arrived not with a blaze, but a seepage of weak light through stained, weary curtains. I surfaced, the night's tension still prickling beneath my skin like embedded glass shards. Instinct drove me to the door. The bolt, the one I'd so meticulously slid into place, was retracted. The chain dangled, inert and loose. I remembered the satisfying click of securing it, a small anchor in the dark. Now it hung open, mocking my memory. A knot tightened in my stomach. My hand trembled as I tested the knob. It yielded effortlessly. Beyond lay the deserted hallway, saturated with the aroma of stale beer and generations of dust. No one. I pulled the door shut, ramming the bolt home again, leaning my weight against the wood for reassurance. My eyes swept the room. The battered dresser, the sagging armchair, the bed that seemed to exhale defeat, the mirror standing impassive and coated in a fine layer of grime. Nothing appeared out of place. I scrubbed at my eyes, forcing deep breaths, the decision hardening within me. I had to leave this place, yet escape remained a vague concept. My previous life was a shoreline rapidly receding. I was adrift with no immediate harbor. This motel, cheap and incurious, was my only temporary mooring. Reaching for the bedside phone yielded only silence. Its cord lay in a dusty tangle. I riffled through the tattered motel guide and menu left on the nightstand. Amidst crumpled takeout flyers and faded ads, a folded scrap of newsprint fluttered out. Yellowed, brittle, it bore the motel's name alongside a terse mention of a guest gone missing years ago. Few details, just the stark fact. A cold spiderweb traced itself across my skin. Left by a prior occupant? The date was obscured, the ink bled faint. I hastily tucked it back, unwilling to dwell on its implications. The day became a slow crawl of attempted distractions. I paced the confines of the room, showered beneath a tepid, reluctant stream, the soap's vaguely rancid perfume clinging to my skin. Tried to anchor myself in practicalities. I examined the mirror's frame more closely. The wood felt warped, strangely porous. Near the base, almost invisible, were minuscule scratches, resembling half-formed letters or symbols gouged into the surface. Leaning in, I caught that faint, bitter odor again. Old varnish mingled with something else, something unsettlingly organic. The markings remained cryptic, resisting interpretation. I wiped the mirror's surface with a damp towel, expecting to lift layers of neglect. The cloth came away almost clean, leaving only the stark reality of my own face staring back. Pale, drawn, eyes webbed with red from sleeplessness. As dusk bled into the room, softening the harsh edges, a fragile calm settled. I choked down a protein bar that tasted like compacted sawdust. The television flickered through channels of static snow, evangelical sales pitches, and the ghosts of old sitcoms. Silence reclaimed the space, punctuated by the neon sign's persistent hum and the occasional sigh of a passing car. Periodically, my gaze darted to the door, verifying the bolt's position. I even wedged the room's single, unstable chair beneath the knob. Any attempt to enter would surely announce itself now. Midnight oozed across the threshold. My eyelids felt weighted with lead, yet fear remained a vigilant sentinel. When oblivion finally claimed me, it was shallow, disturbed by the sound of my own ragged breathing. Later, how much later I couldn't say, a soft creak tore through the quiet. Not the door this time, something else. Perhaps the ancient dresser settling deeper into its senescence, or a floorboard groaning under the building's weight. Regardless, I was instantly awake, bolt upright, a cold sweat plastering my shirt to my spine. The lamp was off. I must have succumbed to exhaustion without switching it on. Only the lurid neon haze persisted. My gaze was drawn magnetically to the mirror. Something was wrong within its depths. The reflected image of the door's chain lock appeared distorted, stretched unnaturally taut. I blinked, straining to focus through the gloom. The physical door remained shut, the chain undisturbed. Yet the mirror presented a subtly altered reality, a funhouse version of the room. Then came a sound, a delicate tap, tap, tap. Not from the hallway, from behind me. My blood turned to ice water. Slowly, every muscle screaming in protest, I rotated my head. The dresser. The sound had originated from within the hulking piece of furniture. Knees threatening to buckle, I approached it. Trembling fingers fumbled with the top drawer's handle. Inside, only motel stationery and the pervasive scent of must. The second drawer resisted, then gave way with a stubborn scrape. As it opened, something thin and flat dislodged from behind the dresser, fluttering silently to the carpet. Kneeling, I retrieved it. A small photograph, monochrome, its edges softened and frayed by handling. It depicted a woman standing before this very room, the same imposing mirror visible behind her. Her face was indistinct, blurred by time or motion. Penciled on the reverse, in faint Lupin script, were 2 words, "Always here." A profound shudder racked me. I placed the photograph carefully on the unmade bed. When I looked back at the mirror, my own reflection seemed subtly skewed, off-center. My breath hitched. The taste of bile rose in my throat. A sudden, desperate imperative seized me. The mirror had to go. I couldn't bear its silent, watchful presence a moment longer. Shoving the heavy dresser aside with grunting effort, I attempted to lift the mirror. It wasn't affixed to the wall, merely propped against it, yet it possessed an impossible weight, anchoring itself to the floor. My muscles screamed. Sweat beaded on my palms. It refused to yield more than a fraction of an inch. Sliding my hand along its edge, I felt tiny splinters embed themselves in my fingertips. Frustration curdled into panic. Snatching a towel from the bathroom, I flung it over the upper half of the glass, obscuring at least part of my distorted image. A shaky breath escaped me. Stepping back, I felt a marginal easing of the tension. The instant I turned towards the bed, the doorknob clicked. Sheer terror, sharp and electric, surged through me. I lunged forward, slamming my shoulder against the door. It held firm. The chain rattled faintly. But as my gaze dropped, I watched, horrified, as the brass bolt began to retract. Smoothly, inexorably, as if guided by an unseen force, it slid backward in its housing with a soft metallic whisper. My heart hammered against my sternum like a trapped bird. I pressed my palm against a bolt, trying to force it back, to resist its silent withdrawal. It felt slick, alien under my touch, no longer solid metal but something yielding, alive. My arms trembled violently. For a heartbeat, I held it, then stumbled back, a ragged gasp tearing from my lungs. Was that laughter echoing faintly in the room, or just the frantic rasp of my own breathing? I spun around, confronting the mirror. The towel had slipped, revealing my reflection once more. And now, the true horror crystallized. My reflection's eyes were not looking at me. They were angled slightly away, focused on something else within the room, something beyond my line of sight. I took an involuntary step closer, nausea churning in my stomach. My legs felt like water. Sweat traced cold paths down my temples. The mirror's surface seemed to ripple, coated in a greasy film that twisted my reflected mouth into a horrifying approximation of a grin. I couldn't endure it. Yanking at the doorknob again, propelled by pure instinct, I was determined to flee, regardless of the hour. The chain fell away without resistance. The bolt, which moments before had been locked in an impossible struggle, now slid aside with frictionless ease. The door swung open onto the same dim, empty hallway, thick with the smell of dust and neglect. Snatching my bag, I stumbled out, abandoning any thought of organized departure. Escape was the only imperative. Escape from that suffocating chamber, from that malevolent glass. In the corridor's weak fluorescent glare, I hesitated, compelled to look back. Through the partially open door, I caught one final glimpse of the mirror. In that flickering, uncertain light, I could have sworn I saw it. A shadow detaching itself from the background, a shape within the glass that was definitely not my own. A violent lurch in my chest sent me reeling backward, pulling the door shut with a decisive thud. Outside, in the pre-dawn gray of the parking lot, the air felt blessedly cool, though the terror clung to me like a second skin, making it crawl. My hands shook uncontrollably as I fumbled for my car keys. Settling into the driver's seat, poised for flight, I felt a prickle of awareness at the edge of my vision. I flipped down the sun visor. My face stared back from the small vanity mirror. A glacial chill permeated me. For one terrifying, suspended second, the eyes looking back were not entirely mine. Darker, hollower, imbued with the stale, watchful stillness of that motel room. I slammed the visor shut, turned the key, the engine catching with a reassuring roar. As I sped away from that blighted structure, leaving it shrinking in the rearview mirror, I couldn't shake the insidious certainty that I hadn't left entirely alone. Something had adhered to me, a sliver of that cursed glass lurking just beneath the surface of my reflection, waiting. The laboratory breathed in the dead hours, its sterile air humming under the sickly pulse of overhead lighting around 2 a.m. Solitude was the presumed companion of my nocturnal toil, yet the sudden echo of footfalls sharp against the linoleum silence of the outer corridor announced an unwelcome deviation in the night's quiet script. Weeks had dissolved into the relentless pursuit of my thesis, a blur of illuminated data streams and computational simulations. This sterile environment, with its low-thrumming machinery and the ghost of chemical reagents, had paradoxically become a sanctuary. Tonight, however, that fragile peace shattered. The footsteps advanced, measured, deliberate. I held my breath, a statue carved from apprehension, my gaze riveted to the threshold. The door sighed open, framing a silhouette both familiar and jarringly out of place. Dr. Eris Thorne, a senior colleague of my own advisor. "Ah, Ilara," he crooned, the cheerfulness in his tone a discordant note in the pre-dawn stillness. "I suspected I might discover you burning the proverbial oil." A smile, thin and brittle, stretched across my lips, a poor mask for the disquiet churning within. Dr. Thorne. I hadn't anticipated company this late. He glided into the room, pulling the door closed behind him. The soft click of the latch resonated with an unnerving finality. "Necessity, my dear," he offered, a dismissive flick of his wrist accompanying the words. "The muse often prefers the hush of night, wouldn't you agree?" I offered a non-committal nod, turning pointedly back towards the glow of my monitor, hoping the gesture conveyed a desire for solitude. It failed. I felt, rather than saw, him drift closer, his presence looming over my shoulder, his attention snagged by the complex patterns cascading across the screen. "Such intriguing pathways you explore here," he murmured, his breath a humid whisper uncomfortably close to my ear. "Refresh my memory. The precise nature of this inquiry?" I shifted subtly, reclaiming a sliver of personal space. "It's a novel paradigm for data encryption," I stated, striving for a detached, academic tone. "Leveraging quantum entanglement principles to forge theoretically impenetrable ciphers." His eyes, magnified behind their lenses, seemed to ignite with an intensity that prickled my skin. Impenetrable? Truly fascinating. Utterly fascinating. An internal alarm, silent but insistent, began to shrill. Dr. Thorne, in our few previous encounters, had been the epitome of polite detachment. This sudden, almost avaricious curiosity felt fundamentally wrong. "It remains nascent," I countered, minimizing the active window displaying my core algorithms. "A significant journey lies ahead before any practical application." A low chuckle rumbled in his chest, raising the fine hairs on my nape. "Indeed, I'm sure. But even nascent concepts possess considerable value in the appropriate hands naturally." My pulse quickened, a frantic drum against my ribs. The implication, veiled though it was, landed with chilling precision. I pushed back my chair and stood, needing the solid feel of the floor beneath me, needing distance. Well, the hour grows late. I should probably gather my things. Dr. Thorne remained immobile, a sudden statue blocking my intended path. His gaze, typically shielded, now seemed unnervingly direct, analytical. "Before you depart, perhaps allow me a more thorough examination of your data sets. My perspective might yield some beneficial insights." Hesitation warred with instinct. Every fiber screamed for flight, yet he was an established figure, linked professionally to my advisor. An outright refusal felt perilous, potentially jeopardizing years of work. "The offer is generous," I began, choosing my words with painstaking care, "but perhaps premature. Research integrity protocols, you understand." For a fleeting instant, the affable veneer fractured, exposing something harder, colder beneath. "Ilara, please. We are academics, are we not? Is the free exchange of knowledge not the very bedrock of our profession?" I took an involuntary step backward, my hip colliding with the cool, unforgiving edge of the lab bench. "Of course, Dr. Thorne, but this constitutes the core of my doctoral work. Disseminating raw data prior to peer review and publication, I'm simply not comfortable." His smile returned, but it failed to reach his eyes, leaving them flat and watchful. I comprehend your caution. Yet consider, a promising researcher such as yourself might find certain forms of support advantageous, both scholarly and fiscal. The unspoken proposition hung heavy in the sterile air. My throat constricted as the full, ugly shape of the situation materialized. This wasn't mere academic overreach. It was an attempt at intellectual piracy. My current arrangements are quite satisfactory, thank you, I replied, my voice gaining a firmness that surprised even me. Now, if you would please step aside, I truly must be leaving. I reached for my satchel, but he shifted, fluidly interposing himself between me and the door. I fear you fail to grasp the magnitude of this, Ilara. Your work possesses revolutionary potential. Without influential advocacy, however, it risks languishing in obscurity. I possess that influence. I can ensure your discoveries achieve the prominence they merit. My thoughts raced, a desperate scramble for an exit strategy. The emergency door beckoned, but its alarm would announce my flight to the entire building. My phone lay dormant in my bag, separated from me by the imposing figure of Dr. Thorne. Your interest is noted, I said, battling to maintain a veneer of calm, but I decline any external assistance. My advisor and I have a clear path forward. His features hardened, the last vestiges of collegiality dissolving. Your advisor lacks the vision to comprehend its true implications. Others, however, do. Others who would compensate generously for even a preliminary glimpse. The pretense evaporated. He was overtly stating his intention to broker my research. A surge of indignation sliced through the fear. That is not an option, I stated, my voice ringing with conviction. Now, allow me to pass. He advanced another step, his proximity becoming physically intimidating. Regrettably, I cannot permit that. Not until we arrive at a mutually beneficial arrangement. My heart hammered against my ribs, trapped, cornered between the unyielding bench and the predatory professor. Then, as my fingers brushed the cool, smooth surface behind me, a desperate improvisation sparked. In a single, fluid motion, my hand closed around a heavy beaker filled with distilled water. I flung its contents directly into his face. He recoiled with a choked gasp, sputtering, hands flying up to clear his vision. That momentary breach in his control was my only chance. I darted past him, snatching my satchel from the bench as I sprinted towards the door, wrenching it open. You will rue this decision. His enraged shout echoed behind me, but I was already a blur in the fluorescent-lit hallway, feet pounding, adrenaline singing in my veins. I didn't pause, didn't look back, until the sanctuary of my car enveloped me, my hands trembling violently as I fumbled the key into the ignition. Pulling away, a glance in the rearview mirror captured Thorne emerging from the building, his face a mask of fury under the harsh exterior lights. The ensuing days were shrouded in a fog of anxiety and hypervigilance. The lab remained off limits. I worked remotely, starting at every unexpected creak or shadow. The imperative to act warred with a paralyzing dread, the fear of disbelief, of academic ruin. Yet, as the initial shock subsided, righteous anger began to displace the fear. This was my creation, forged through sleepless nights and relentless effort. I would not be intimidated into surrendering it. I scheduled a meeting with my advisor, Dr. Lena Petrova. Seated in her familiar office, palms slick with sweat, pulse erratic, I recounted the events of that harrowing night. Relief washed over me, immense and profound, as she absorbed my story not with skepticism, but with immediate, fierce belief. More than belief, indignation. "This is utterly unconscionable," she declared, her typical scholarly composure replaced by a steely anger. "We are taking this directly to the dean, immediately." What followed was a cascade of formal proceedings, tense meetings, meticulous investigations, uncomfortable depositions. Dr. Thorne initially issued vehement denials, but confronted with corroborating evidence, including time-stamped security footage capturing his prolonged, unauthorized presence in the lab that night, his facade crumbled. His confession unearthed a disturbing pattern. Other students, other junior researchers stepped forward with analogous accounts of coercion and attempted intellectual theft. The ensuing scandal sent shockwaves through the department, culminating in Thorne's summary dismissal and a comprehensive reinforcement of research security protocols. For my part, I plunged back into my work, imbued with a fierce, renewed sense of purpose. The ordeal had undoubtedly scarred me, yet it had also illuminated the profound value of my research. If it inspired such desperate measures, it was unquestionably worth defending, worth pursuing. Months later, standing at the podium, presenting my defended thesis to the faculty committee, the sense of accomplishment transcended mere academic validation. It was a testament to resilience, a quiet declaration of victory over an insidious threat to both my work and my integrity. The ensuing applause felt validating, certainly, but the true triumph resided in the unshakable knowledge that this research was unequivocally mine, earned through intellectual rigor and fortified by perseverance against adversity. As I stepped down, Dr. Petrova intercepted me near the auditorium exit, her expression radiating pride. "Stellar work, Alara," she affirmed, "and you should know we've already fielded several intriguing inquiries regarding potential applications of your encryption methodology. Entirely legitimate inquiries, of course." A genuine grin spread across my face, a complex blend of exhilaration and vindication. That's wonderful news. I'm eager to explore where this path leads. Walking together out into the unambiguous light of day, a current of optimism flowed through me. The journey ahead promised its own set of challenges, its own labyrinthine complexities, but the confrontation with Thorne had forged within me an unexpected strength. It had taught me an indelible lesson. In the vanguard of discovery, knowledge is indeed power, and safeguarding that knowledge can be as vital, as demanding, as the act of discovery itself. A disquiet settled into the marrow of the house that first evening. Unpacking done, the kitchen boxes disgorged, I sank onto the living room's time-worn sofa, seeking equilibrium. That's when I registered it, a resonance beneath the threshold of hearing, emanating from the hallway's shadowed terminus. A faint, constant vibration, less a sound, more a felt presence, like a prayer wheel turning infinitely slowly, barely there. I stilled, straining to pinpoint its origin. It pulsed from the last bedroom, the one left deliberately vacant, a receptacle for future plans. Its door gaped open onto darkness. The room itself, a stark cube of bare walls and an unadorned window, should have been utterly mute. Compelled, I rose. My socked feet whispered down the corridor. Each step amplified the tension. As my shadow fell across the threshold, the low thrum simply ceased, vanished. Inside, only emptiness greeted me. My gaze swept the corners, traced the ceiling's sharp lines, lingered on the naked wooden floorboards. Outside the window, the familiar geometry of a neighbor's fence, the distant glow of street lights painting the asphalt. Silence, but for the refrigerator's mundane sigh from the kitchen behind me. Retreating to the sofa, I tried to rationalize. An errant frequency from outside, a neighbor's radio bleeding through the ether, street chatter warped by distance. 10 minutes dissolved into the quiet hum of settling in, and then it returned. The same subsonic intonation, the texture of a hushed, repetitive chant. Indecipherable, yet undeniably vocal, like someone murmuring secrets meant only for the walls. Again, I moved, this time with practiced stealth. The hallway swam in gloom, lit only by the spill from the living room lamp. Slowly, deliberately, I drifted towards the source. The sound persisted, a low drone unwavering until the very moment I breached the doorway. Silence snapped shut like a trap. I flicked the overhead light, bathing the void in harsh illumination. Every angle scrutinized, the space behind the door examined, the window's view reconfirmed. Vacant, mute, utterly alone. A prickle crawled across my scalp. A fine sheen of moisture bloomed on my forehead. This wasn't right. The house, though possessing age, wore recent renovations like a disguise. Solid walls, the landlord had assured me. No obvious cracks, no conduits for clandestine whispers. I prowled the adjacent empty bedroom, peered into its closet, knelt by its window, pressed my ear to the cool plaster. Nothing. Only the house breathing its quiet, inanimate breaths. That night, sleep offered a fitful escape behind my own closed door, positioned strategically far from the corridor's end. The expectation of the sound was a phantom limb, an itch I couldn't scratch, but exhaustion eventually claimed me. Daylight banished the phantoms. I immersed myself in the tangible, assembling my work desk, wrestling with cables, coaxing the internet into life. My home office took shape. The neighborhood drowsed peacefully. Birdsong, the low thrum of my computer, the distant punctuation of a dog's bark. Several times, drawn by a morbid curiosity, I revisited the problematic room. It remained obstinately mundane under the sun's scrutiny. White walls, a window overlooking the front lawn, polished floorboards reflecting the light. No hidden panels, no loose boards yielding secrets. My knuckles rapped against the plaster, solid, unrevealing. Evening descended, and with it, a renewed tension. After dinner, I settled in the living room, the television dark, the empty bedroom's door intentionally left ajar, an experiment in stillness. An hour ticked by in near silence before the familiar vibration seeped back into the air. That low, steady hum, wordless but unmistakably human, spooling out from the room down the hall. A chill traced my spine. My pulse quickened. Slowly, I rose. This time, no direct approach. I moved with exaggerated care, minimizing floorboard creaks, a hunter stalking an elusive sound. Closer, closer. The humming held. I reached the doorway, the resonance clearer now, a definite vocal quality. Calm, low-pitched, unwavering. Leaning, craning my neck to peer around the jam without crossing the threshold. Nothing. The window sealed, the floor bare. One tentative step forward, my foot landing just inside the room. Instant silence. The fine hairs on my arms lifted. Again, the futile check behind the door, the upward glance, the window thrown open to the quiet street. Parked cars gleaming faintly under a solitary porch light across the way. Nothing. I secured the window, retreating once more. An idea sparked. Recording. My phone emerged, the audio app launched. I waited, poised. 30 minutes later, the hum began its subtle infiltration. Record. Holding the phone aloft like a divining rod, I crept forward, a slow-motion pilgrimage towards the source. The humming persisted, threading through the silence until the precise moment my phone, clutched in my hand, passed the invisible boundary. Silence. Playback yielded only the whisper of my own breath, the ambient hiss of an empty recording. A frustrated sigh escaped me, tension knotting my shoulders. I paced the hallway, toggling the light switch in a restless rhythm. Lingering just outside the doorway proved fruitless. The sound remained dormant. It only manifested when I was elsewhere. Living room, kitchen, distance seemed to be its prerequisite, my proximity its antidote. That night, a new tactic. My phone, recording app active, was placed sentinel inside the empty chamber. I retreated to my bedroom, closed the door, and waited. An hour stretched. Returning, I paused at the threshold, listening. Silence. I stepped inside, retrieved the device. Playback revealed a faint, ephemeral hum embedded midway through the recording. A few seconds of low vibration, abruptly truncated, indistinct, genderless, patternless. Just there, then gone. Replaying it offered no further clarity. Unease became my unwelcome companion over the ensuing days. The hallway felt charged after dark, a space to be traversed quickly. Work routines, music played through headphones, evening distractions. These became my armor. Yet, in moments of quiet, when the music stopped or the television fell silent, the low, insistent humming would inevitably bleed back into my awareness, always from that vacant room. Knocking on the hallway wall during an episode brought immediate silence. Calling out, "Is anyone there?" yielded only echoing quiet. The attic offered dust and insulation, devoid of life. The crawl space beneath the house revealed only pipes and cobwebs. A step ladder granted intimate access to the bedroom ceiling. No vents, no hidden speakers, simple wiring. The window frame solid. The closet shallow and unremarkable. Sleep became reliant on the television's drone, a bulwark against the quiet. Yet curiosity gnawed. Lowering the volume, I'd listen, Always, eventually, it was there. Never louder, never shifting its low, steady pitch, always extinguished the second I tried to enter its domain. One night, another experiment. A cheap baby monitor, unearthed from storage, its transmitter placed within the room, the receiver beside me in the living room. Static hissed. Then, faintly at first, the humming emerged. Clearer now through the electronic ear, a distinct sequence of low notes. Receiver clutched tight, I hurried down the hall. The sound cut out long before I arrived. The transmitter sat undisturbed. Anxiety began to fray my edges. Appetite waned. Fatigue became a constant state. The thought of calling the landlord brought a flush of embarrassment. Complaining about a phantom hum? He'd dismiss me as neurotic. Involving friends felt like admitting defeat, exposing them to this unsettling peculiarity. I forced myself to sleep in the room one night, a sleeping bag laid upon the bare floorboards. Darkness pressed in, the house settling around me. Drifting towards sleep, I heard it again. Distant now, strangely displaced, yet undeniably the same vibration. Sitting bolt upright, heart hammering against my ribs, the sound vanished instantly. I waited, breathing shallowly in the cold, dust-scented air. Hours passed in hyper-vigilant silence. The hum did not return as long as I remained within the room's confines. The following day left me drained, resentment simmering. I stood in the empty room, addressing the silence, speaking aloud my desire for peace, for an untroubled existence. No reply came. It was just a room, indifferent and bare. 2 weeks bled into this strange rhythm. Enough? I borrowed an old handheld tape recorder from a friend, hoping its analog nature might capture what the phone could not. Positioned in the hallway, just outside the door, recording continuously, I retreated to the living room's dim quiet. The humming began, audible from my seat. I let it establish itself, then crept forward, inching the recorder closer. Near the doorway, it stopped. The tape held only a fleeting, faint impression of the sound. Standing outside on the lawn late at night, straining to hear through the deliberately opened bedroom window, yielded nothing. Carrying the baby monitor receiver outside while the transmitter remained within the open-windowed room. Silence. Only upon returning inside, settling back into the house's interior spaces, did the low thrum resume. It lived inside, tethered to that room, recoiling from my direct presence. Stuck. Moving again felt unthinkable. The deposits, the utilities, the sheer disruption. Yet, evenings in the living room became fraught. I gravitated towards my bedroom, cocooned in music. Still, the mystery pulled. One evening, I attempted a stealth approach from the kitchen, moving low, hugging the wall, trying to remain unseen. The humming continued, a low, steady pulse, until the very instant my head edged around the doorframe. Silence. The abruptness never lost its power to startle, to send a jolt through my system, leaving my palms damp, my breath caught high in my chest. Putting furniture in the room, claiming the space, felt paradoxically threatening. The image of arranging a bookshelf while that sound flickered on and off just beyond my perception induced a wave of nausea. Eventually, earplugs became nightly companions. A fan whirred, generating white noise. Some nights, oblivion was achieved. Others, drawn by the persistent enigma, I'd step into the hallway. The pattern held, immutable. Hum in my absence, silence upon approach. No source ever revealed itself. No hidden speaker, no technical glitch, no spectral occupant caught in a flashlight beam. My challenges: if someone is there, say something, met only the resonant quiet that followed the hum's cessation. Placing a chair inside, facing the door, a silent observer, changed nothing. Ultimately, an uneasy truce settled. I learned to live around it. Quiet evenings in the living room were forsaken. Music played, or the television offered its constant chatter. Sometimes I drove aimlessly after dark, simply to escape the listening tension. Returning late, I'd head straight for my bedroom sanctuary. Mornings brought normalcy, the room reverting to its blank state. 4 walls, a window, no trace, no scent, no stain. The humming persists, an intermittent, quiet resident. I no longer chase its origin. Explanations feel futile. I maintain my distance. I live my life. There seems to be nothing else to do. The campfire's gentle susurrus, a warm heartbeat in the vast, cool dark, was abruptly pierced by a brittle percussion, the snap of a twig, too sharp, too close. We froze mid-laugh, the sound echoing unnaturally in the sudden silence. Nervous energy arced between us like static. In that instant, the threadbare script of cinematic dread became terrifyingly real. We were adrift in the wild, miles from any semblance of safety, and something was hunting us. It was meant to be a catharsis, a brief pilgrimage from urban cacophony. Just 4 souls seeking solace. Finn, my oldest confidant, steadfast and grounded. Maya, his steady flame, her wit a welcome spark. Reese, my university shadow, prone to morbid fascinations. And I, Leo, eager for the cleansing breath of the pines. Months of anticipation had culminated in this escape. Our first day unfolded like a dream. A deep trek along a trail Finn swore led to paradise, sunlight dripping gold through the arboreal lace overhead, a benevolent breeze keeping the biting insects subdued. We'd established our small haven in a clearing, kissed by the lake's edge, erecting tents and gathering wood under skies shifting from azure to violet. Night draped itself over the woods, profound and star-dusted. We clustered near the flames, charring marshmallows, weaving tales. The moon, a polished silver coin, cast an ethereal luminescence upon the water, a scene ripped from some idealized brochure. It was Reese, his features sculpted by flame and shadow, who punctured the piece. This forest swallows people whole, remember? Those hikers last year? Maya groaned, a low sound of exasperation. Reese, must you? We just settled in. It's not folklore, he insisted, leaning forward, the firelight dancing in his eyes. Made the news feeds. Vanished. Poof. No bodies, no clues, nothing. I tried to deflect. Easy, man. Let's keep it light. But Reese, relentless, spun the narrative, embroidering the sparse facts with unsettling conjecture until even pragmatic Finn shifted uneasily. All right, Bard of the Bleak, Maya declared, rising abruptly. I'm hitting the sack before your stories crawl under my skin. We murmured agreement, the spell broken. Zipping myself into my nylon shell, an undeniable prickle persisted. the sensation of being observed from the dense tree line. I dismissed it as Reese's atmospheric poisoning and courted sleep. It was the dead of night when biology's insistent call pulled me from the warmth. Grudgingly, I surfaced, fumbling for my torch. The campsite slumbered, profoundly still, the embers of the fire mere orange ghosts. Stepping towards a cluster of trees, my torch carved a trembling path through the absolute black. As I turned to return, a flicker at vision's edge, a bulk, swift and silent, vanishing between two ancient trunks. My pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Just fauna, I reasoned weakly. A deer, perhaps. Yet the unease clung like mist. I hurried back, scanning the perimeter, the silence now feeling less peaceful, more predatory. That's when the void gaped where solid presence should have been. One of our rucksacks, left near the fire's ghost, was gone. Adrenaline surged, chasing away the last vestiges of sleep. "Guys," I hissed, shaking Finn and Maya's tent, then Reese's. "Wake up. Something's out here. One of the packs is missing." Finn surfaced, bleary-eyed annoyance etched on his face. "Leo, what are you on about?" I recounted the fleeting shape, the discovered theft. As I spoke, the skepticism in Finn's gaze slowly curdled into sharp concern. A swift inventory confirmed the loss. Finn's pack, our lifeline, charts, compass, the bulk of our provisions, vanished. "A bear, maybe," Maya whispered, her voice thin. Reese shook his head, eyes wide. "No bear takes just one bag. They ransack. This was deliberate." We huddled, debating panicked options under the indifferent stars. Sleep was unthinkable. Our only recourse felt flimsy. Rebuild the fire, stay vigilant, wait for dawn's distant promise. As the revitalized flames leaped, painting our faces with frantic light, we heard it again, wood protesting under weight, somewhere just beyond the fire's reach. We pivoted as one, straining our eyes against the oppressive dark. "Hello?" Finn called out, his voice remarkably level. Only silence answered, thick and watchful. Then, a counterpoint snap, nearer. Another, flanking us from the opposite side. Reese's breath hitched. "Gods, Leo, they're around us." Instinct took over. I seized a blazing branch from the fire, holding it aloft like a desperate votive. The others mirrored the action. We formed a tight circle, back to back, our makeshift torches thrust outwards. And then the watchers revealed themselves. Not shapes, but pinpricks of reflected firelight, orbiting us in the darkness. Multiple pairs at varying heights. Whatever stalked us, it wasn't singular, and it was closing the ring. "Lake!" My cry shattered the paralysis. "Run for the water!" We plunged into the chaotic darkness of the undergrowth, branches whipping at our faces. Crashing pursuit echo behind us, impossibly swift, unnervingly close. We burst from the tree line, spilling onto the moon-slicked stones of the shore. Risking a backward glance, the sight seared itself into my mind, chilling the blood. Shapes scrambled across the ground, horrifyingly humanoid in basic structure, yet scuttling low on all fours with a broken, loping rhythm. Their skin gleamed pale, almost translucent under the moon, stretched taut over sharp angles, and their eyes, they burned with a bilious yellow light. "What in the hell are those things?" Maya's shriek tore through the night, tight with pure terror. No time for answers. One erupted from the pack, landing scant yards from Reese with a sickening thud. Proximity stole breath, slick, naked skin clinging to elongated limbs, a gaping maw bristling with needle-fine fangs. Reese reacted with primal reflex, a wild arc of his torch. The burning end connected with the creature's face, a sound ripped from no earthly throat, high-pitched and agonizing. It staggered back, momentarily stunned, but the pack flowed forward, undeterred. "Water!" Finn bellowed again. "Maybe they won't follow." A desperate gamble. We threw ourselves into the lake's embrace. It was a frigid fist clenching around our chests. Gasping, I looked back. On the bank, the things prowled, their movements agitated, emitting low hisses and guttural snarls of thwarted hunger. Adrift in the glacial heart of the lake, we treaded water, breath pluming white in the cold air, the phosphorescent eyes pinning us from the shore. What now? Maya's voice was brittle, chattering. The chill seeped into bone, profound and debilitating. Survival felt measured in shivering minutes. We couldn't stay here indefinitely. Reese's earlier tale of the vanished hikers surfaced in my mind, venomous and chillingly plausible. As if sensing my thoughts, he began, his voice strained. "Leo, those missing campers, you don't think—" "Stop," Finn commanded, his voice raw with cold and fear. "Don't go there. We focus on surviving. That's all." But how? Hope dwindled, replaced by a crushing certainty of doom. Trapped between the freezing depths and the shoreline horrors. Time became an agony of endurance. Hours crawled by. We huddled instinctively for shared warmth, taking turns supporting the most exhausted, muscles screaming protest, limbs turning numb. Then, subtly at first, a dilution of the absolute dark. The eastern sky began to blush, the first shy promise of dawn, and with it, a change. The watchers stirred, their pacing growing hesitant. As the light gained strength, they began to melt back, slinking into the forest's deeper shadows like nightmares afraid of the day. "Look," I rasped, disbelief warring with burgeoning hope. "They're leaving." We watched, scarcely breathing as the last pale shape vanished amongst the trees. The shoreline was vacant. Cautiously, agonizingly, we swam back to land, limbs wooden, teeth rattling a frantic, uncontrollable rhythm. Alive, but battered. We staggered towards the violated camp. Our flimsy shelters lay in tatters, ribbons of nylon bearing the savage signature of claws. Finn's pack remained absent, its contents likely sustaining our tormentors. Salvaging what few scraps remained untouched, we began the exodus, the long trek back towards a world that suddenly felt fragile and distant. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent fresh spikes of fear down our spines. Hours later, the sight of the ranger station felt like surfacing from a deep, dark dive. Our fractured, breathless narrative, however, met polite, impenetrable skepticism. No reports of unusual activity, no missing persons fitting Reese's remembered details. Aggressive fauna, they suggested gently. A bear, maybe disoriented. They offered explanations. We offered traumatized silence. We knew bears didn't move like that. Bears didn't have those eyes. The subsequent weeks yielded nothing. No obscure legends, no hushed local whispers, no corroboration for our impossible night. Sleep remains a treacherous country, haunted by the phantom glow of yellow eyes and the memory of needle teeth. The questions fester, unanswered, What were they? Ancient inhabitants the forest jealously guarded? Something else? And the most chilling thought, are they still waiting, patient and hungry, in those shadowed woods? One thing has become undeniable. The wilderness holds secrets far darker and more visceral than I ever imagined. Some thresholds, once crossed, leave you forever looking back, peering into the deep, silent darkness. I will never court those depths again. My apartment, I'd always believed, was too compact, too utterly mundane to harbor secrets of a spectral nature. 4 rooms tethered by a slender corridor, hardly a labyrinth. My possessions are few, surfaces kept clear. Comfort, usually, is easily found within these walls. Yet, for the past fortnight, an unsettling ritual has appended itself to my evenings, unfurling in the moments after my shower. Not the groan of ancient plumbing or the settling sighs of the building, but something far more insidious. A phantom footfall, mirroring my own barefoot cadence on the cool floor tiles. A disquieting echo I initially dismissed as auditory illusion. Now, certainty wavers. Worse, tangible evidence blooms. Twin sets of damp impressions mark my passage, my own distinct prints, and beside them, spectral companions. Solitude defines my existence here, perched on the second floor of a structure whose bones creak with age. An elevator groans and shudders in its shaft, a mechanical beast I avoid in favor of the stairs. My door yields directly into the living space, furnished with stark simplicity, a modest sofa, a low table, a stand bearing the television. To the left, a constricted kitchen. Ahead, the short passage leading to bedroom and bath. Unremarkable, yes, but sufficient. A year I've resided here, undisturbed by anything beyond the commonplace. The evening shower is my custom, a necessary cleansing after days often spent amidst grime and exertion. Post-ablution, I eschew slippers, preferring the direct contact of bare skin against tile, the cool kiss of the floor, the faint dampness trailing in my wake. It began subtly, perhaps 2 weeks past. Towel knotted at my waist, I emerged from the steam-wreathed bathroom, heading towards the kitchen for water. A soft thump, asynchronous with my own tread, snagged my attention. I halted, listening. Silence pressed in. Shrugging it off, I proceeded. Returning towards the living room, it recurred. A delicate slap against the ceramic, the ghost of another bare footfall close behind. I froze, breath held captive, straining against the quiet. Nothing. Merely water dripping from my hair, I reasoned, or the minute squeak of skin on tile. It warranted no further thought. The following evening, returning late, I showered and once more padded barefoot through the apartment, senses now pricked by the memory of that errant sound. I listened with deliberate focus, walking from bathroom to bedroom, my own steps, tap, 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 and then, unmistakably, an almost identical tap, lagging by a mere fraction of a second. I whirled, the motion stirring the air, causing my towel to flutter. The hallway stretched vacant before me. Only the frantic thrumming of my own pulse disturbed the stillness. My gaze dropped to the floor. A single trail of damp footprints, mine alone. Relief warred with a nascent unease as I exhaled, striving for composure. Days bled into nights, and the phantom step grew bolder, more persistent. Each post-shower traverse was now accompanied by this auditory shadow. It remained proximate, yet never quite immediate, maintaining a small, unnerving distance. Presence implied, but perpetually unseen. Discomfort curdled into anxiety. I experimented, quickening my pace. The echo matched it flawlessly. Sometimes I'd break into a run, slamming my bedroom door shut, pressing an ear to the wood. The apartment would fall utterly silent. I'd wait, breath suspended, until the frantic hammering in my chest became unbearable. One night, compelled by a creeping dread, I deliberately paced a small circle on the living room tiles before the sofa. My own wet tracks gleamed under the low light. Then my breath hitched. Adjacent to my prints, fainter outlines materialized. Impressions mirroring my own feet in size, trailing just behind. Ghostly, as if already succumbing to evaporation. Crouching, heart galloping, I touched the tile near these spectral marks. Cool, damp, as if vacated mere seconds before. My eyes darted around the empty room. A tremor began in my hand. I pushed myself upright, forcing slow, deliberate breaths. From then on, a preemptive tension gripped me even before I turned off the water. I'd linger in the steamy bathroom, towel clutched, dripping onto the mat, dreading the simple act of opening the door. But dress I must. Steeling myself, I'd emerge. Inevitably, the sequence resumed. My step, then the soft echo behind. A glance back revealed nothing. It shadowed me relentlessly. Kitchen, living room, bedroom, always maintaining that same slight remove, forever just beyond the periphery. A few days ago, the phenomenon intensified. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, preparing a simple meal of scrambled eggs. The slap on the tile sounded startlingly close. I spun. Nothing. But there, beside my own feet, stark against the ceramic, glistened a fresh, wet footprint. Pointed the same direction as mine, as if an unseen companion had just sidled up beside me. The spatula clattered from my grasp. My stomach clenched. Adrenaline surged, cold and electric. My palms grew slick. Retreating a few steps, I watched, transfixed, as another print materialized beside the first, appearing from nowhere. No drip from above, no conceivable source. It simply was. My mouth felt like parchment. Mechanically, I grabbed a paper towel, laid it over the impressions. It darkened instantly with moisture. I balled it up, threw it away, switched off the stove, and fled the kitchen. Hunger forgotten. Sleep that night was a shallow, fractured thing. Every settling groan of the old building sent jolts through my system. Lying rigid, staring at the shadowed ceiling, I eventually drifted, only to snap awake hours later, suffocated by the distinct feeling of a presence standing sentinel beside my bed. I bolted upright, fumbling for the bedside lamp, twisting to scan the room. Empty. Sweat beaded on my skin, my mouth arid. Imagination, I desperately told myself, but the conviction felt hollow. Something was fundamentally wrong. Morning light brought a frantic search for mundane explanations. I scoured the apartment, pipes, ceilings, walls, for leaks, for water damage, for any rational cause. Nothing. Only in the bathroom, before the sink, did I find confirmation. 2 sets of footprints. Mine, clear and defined. The other, fainter, yet undeniably present, exhibiting that same unnerving proximity, step for parallel step. I scrubbed the floor with fierce determination, a futile gesture against the encroaching strangeness. Several nights later, resolve hardened within me. Enough. I would stride purposefully into the living room post-shower, pivot swiftly, and confront whatever lurked behind. Standing braced in the bathroom, legs trembling slightly, breath shallow and uneven, I counted silently to 3. Then, bursting through the door, I moved rapidly across the hall into the living area and spun around, heart hammering against my ribs. At first, only my own glistening tracks were visible. Then, right beside them, I watched, horrified, as another set of footprints bloomed into existence, step by watery step, tracing my exact path, forming from nothing. No body, no shadow, just the wet impressions materializing on the tile. A constricting band tightened around my chest. Fists clenched, I stood utterly still, breathing raggedly, blood roaring in my ears. My gaze swept upwards, half expecting a face, a form. Only empty air met my frantic search. I took an involuntary step back towards the bathroom. The footsteps sounded again, immediate, right behind me. I whipped around. Vacancy. The floor held only the twin trails and prints. I retreated further, facing the empty space before me, my mind screaming denial against the visual reality. My back struck the bathroom door frame. I stumbled, catching the knob for balance, then scrambled inside, slamming the door and twisting the lock, a ludicrous action against an invisible pursuer. My hands shook violently. Heart pounding painfully, I slid down the door, pressing my back against the cool porcelain of the tub, drawing my knees to my chest. I remained there for an immeasurable time, focusing solely on regulating my breath. When I finally emerged, no fresh prints greeted me, yet the apartment felt charged, watchful, as if holding its breath. That night, I slept fitfully on the sofa, lights blazing, television murmuring inanely. Every closure of my eyes conjured the image of those footprints, relentlessly forming in my wake. In the days since, the appearances have become more brazen. Sometimes the prints precede me, waiting near the sofa or beneath the coffee table when I round a corner. Other times, the damp slap echoes from beyond, the bathroom door while I'm still showering. I've left the hallway light off. Its occasional flicker only amplifies the disquiet. Rationalization feels increasingly futile. Online searches for structural anomalies, optical illusions, stress-induced hallucinations, none account for wet footprints manifesting before my very eyes. Inviting a friend feels impossible. How to articulate this madness? And the chilling thought. Would their barefoot presence simply invite another set of spectral tracks? Now, stepping from the bathroom triggers an immediate surge of visceral dread, a primal expectation of being seized. My nerves are frayed wires, appetite vanished, sleep a scarce commodity. The footsteps had grown louder. Last night, a distinct shuffle. A soft friction against the tile sounded directly behind me. Turning revealed only the familiar, mocking prints. Whatever this is, it feels closer, bolder. The secondary footprints appear more frequently, sometimes seeming wetter, leaving larger damp patches. I've taken to wearing socks constantly, a pathetic defense. The bare prints still appear beside my socked feet, indifferent to my efforts. Tonight, I sit hunched on the sofa, tapping this account into my phone, needing a record, a testament. Any second, I anticipate that wet slap on the tile. Sweat slicks my palms, my breathing is shallow, my gaze keeps flicking to the hallway entrance, expecting to see them bloom into existence. The chilling fantasy persists. A sudden turn, and something will be there, observing me. Am I prepared for that revelation? Running is not an option. This is my space. Yet, terror is a constant cold companion. A flashlight rests beside me, a talisman of dubious power against an intangible foe, but a comfort nonetheless. The faint, rhythmic drip from the shower tap punctuates the silence. Ordinarily innocuous, tonight it sounds like a countdown. My muscles are locked, neck aching from perpetual vigilance. Perhaps I should just look, confront it, see what there is to see. This limbo of fear is unsustainable. Knowledge, even terrible knowledge, might be preferable. I'm rising now, legs unsteady but moving, heartbeat thunderous in the quiet, breath audible. I reach the hallway's threshold. Silence, save for the bathroom drip, bare feet cold on the ceramic. I step forward. 1 pace, 2. The wet slap echoes just behind. I pivot, flashlight beam stabbing the space where the sound originated. I see it, the damp footprint coalescing, solidifying, right beside my own. Nobody there. A knot tightens in my gut. Breath catches. Another print begins to form, inches from the first. The light illuminates nothing but empty air. My grip on the flashlight is bone white. I cannot remain silent. My voice, a trembling thread. What do you want? No answer. Only the relentless drip, drip, drip from the bathroom. Heart hammering. I take a step back. The phantom prints mirror my retreat, maintaining their unnerving proximity. Goose flesh prickles across my entire body. Run, my instincts scream, but my limbs feel leaden. This won't end until confronted. But how does one confront invisibility, manifest only in watery traces? I stand rooted, flashlight beam sweeping frantically, seeking a shape, an outline, anything, nothing. Yet the footprints continue to appear, closer now, right beside me. Swallowing hard, I summon a final shard of courage, take another step. The mimicry is perfect, synchronous. I spin again, light boring into the space directly behind. A rush of inexplicably cold air washes over me, like a draft in this sealed corridor. My skin crawls, my spine turns to ice. Turning back, I see them forming again, the wet impressions appearing exactly where my next step will fall. The ending remains unwritten. Perhaps I walk forward until it reveals itself. Perhaps I freeze here, paralyzed. But the denial is shattered. I am not alone. Something walks with me, step for step, leaving its chilling, impossible signature in water on the tiles. And maybe, just maybe, if I turn fast enough this time. The building murmured its antiquity from the moment I crossed its threshold 2 months prior, but the elevator positively shrieked decay. Its tarnished metal doors shuddered shut with a percussive rattle. The overhead light pulsed, a weak heartbeat in the gloom. The mirrored panels lining the cabin were scoured dull, filmed over with decades of grime and something else, a peculiar, smoky tint. Not mere dirt, I soon discerned, but an ingrained stain of time itself, lending them a dark, submarine luminescence that unnerved me. Each time the threshold swallowed me late in the evening, a palpable shift occurred, a vacuum pulling the air taut. Not a draft, not the mechanics settling, but as if the very space within the cabin held its breath. I fought to dismiss it, this nascent anxiety, yet my gaze kept snagging on a faint disturbance beside my own reflection in those tarnished mirrors. An outline, indistinct, never quite aligning with my posture or movement, hovering slightly offset like an errant, uncast shadow. Details remained elusive, a mere suggestion of form, and always, the instant the doors groaned open onto a landing, it dissolved. A trick of the tired eye, the play of weary light, these were the rationalizations I clung to. My profession demanded late hours. Midnight, sometimes later, often marked my return. I'd summon the lift from the echoing lobby, watching the antiquated floor indicator above the doors flicker erratically before the cage finally descended with a sigh of protesting cables. Inside, the bulb hummed its discordant tune. Exhaustion typically drove me to lean against the back wall, eyes half closed, and usually, somewhere around the fourth floor's ascent, the mirrored periphery would betray it, that extra silhouette. Motionless at first, yet with each floor climbed it seemed to subtly encroach, drifting closer. By the seventh, it felt adjacent, a whisper of presence almost brushing my arm. Then the doors would slide apart on my floor. I'd step out into the relative normalcy of the corridor, and the shape would be utterly gone. Silence became my confidant. Admitting this spectral sighting aloud felt like courting ridicule. Certainty eluded me, tangible proof non-existent. How easy it was to blame the imagination, strained by the relentless pressure of deadlines, the screen-scorched ache behind my eyes, the fatigue settling deep in my bones. Perhaps hallucinations were blooming in the fertile ground of stress. Yet, on certain nights, the sensation solidified. A distinct chill would kiss my left side, raising goose flesh despite the cabin's stagnant air. The fine hairs on my nape would stir. No draft could account for that localized cold. A knot of dread began tightening in my stomach whenever my finger hovered over the lobby call button. The 12 flights of stairs beckoned, a daunting alternative after a draining day, yet sometimes preferable to the gamble of the mirrored box. Still, exhaustion usually won. I'd ride the lift, attempting to avert my gaze from the panels, a strategy that only amplified my awareness. A flicker in the corner of my eye, a perceived shift in the dim reflection, enough to send my pulse skittering, my breath thinning in my chest. One particular night bled into the early morning hours, closer to 2 a.m. The lobby stood cavernous and deserted, the security desk vacant. I pressed the button, the familiar subterranean rumble announcing the lift's descent. As the doors parted, an immediate chill enveloped me, sharper than usual, carrying a scent of stale metal and something vaguely like damp wool. I stabbed the button for 12. The doors jolted shut. The light flickered twice, violently, then held. The ascent began. My eyes fixed on the worn linoleum, a deliberate effort to ignore the mirrors, but a prickling awareness crawled up my spine. Something felt different, heavier. By the fourth floor, the presence manifested distinctly to my left. A reluctant glance confirmed it. My own reflection, slumped and weary, and beside it, the silhouette, less faint now. No features, just a dense darkness shaped vaguely like a person, near enough that its shoulder might graze mine. I swallowed against a dry throat, forcing calm. Lighting, I insisted internally. Refractions. At the sixth floor, the shadows seemed to glide infinitesimally closer. I held my breath, feeling the dampness bloom on my palms, focusing fiercely on the illuminated numerals tracking our progress. 7th floor. The pressure intensified, an almost tactile sensation against my side. My back muscles seized, the hairs on my neck bristled. The elevator slowed momentarily, a tease, but no one waited. I exhaled, a ragged sound, willing the doors to reach 12 to release me. Instead, the lift gave a violent jerk. It stopped. 8th floor. Confusion warred with nascent panic. I hadn't selected 8, nor had anyone else. The doors remained sealed. The overhead light commenced a frantic, stroboscopic flickering. In the mirror, my reflection wavered, my face a pale mask. Against my will, my eyes were drawn to the adjacent shape. It was no longer just a silhouette. Contours emerged. The slope of shoulders beneath fabric, the lines of arms, the curve of a head. A figure, undeniably male, clad in what looked like a ravaged suit. The cloth torn at the shoulder seams, a tie hanging like a shredded ribbon. His face, stark white, bore deep hollows around the eyes. Disheveled hair framed his features, and he was staring directly at me. A faint, unnerving half-smile playing on his lips that constricted my throat. My fingers fumbled for the emergency button, jamming it down. A dull, pathetic bell sounded once within the cabin, then silence. Nothing else. The air grew colder, leaching warmth from my skin. A shaky breath escaped me as I tried the floor buttons again. 12, lobby, anything. Dead, unresponsive. My gaze snapped back to the mirror. The figure remained, but now he occupied my space in the reflection as if we'd traded places. My own image was gone, replaced entirely by him. Still smiling, that unblinking, vacant smile. My hands began to tremble uncontrollably. I swiped at the sudden sweat beading on my forehead. Another flicker, plunging the cabin into momentary blackness. When the light returned, he was gone, my own terrified face staring back. Then, like a faulty projection, he flashed back into existence, but this time behind me in the reflection. I could see his chilling grin peering over my shoulder, yet the air behind me in the physical space remained empty. I spun around, nothing, but the mirror held his image inches from my reflected face, a glacial touch, like fingers of ice, pressed against my spine. A scream lodged in my throat, voiceless. The overhead bulb buzzed, dimmed almost to extinction, then flared again. His eyes, reflected, locked onto mine. In the mirror, he lifted a hand, slowly, deliberately, and placed it on my shoulder. Simultaneously, an intense, crushing pressure landed on that exact spot on my body. I yelped, stumbling sideways, heart battering my ribs like a trapped bird. My chest felt banded, air refusing to fill my lungs properly. I slammed my palms against the cool metal walls, beat against the unyielding doors, shouting for help, the sounds swallowed by the insulated box. No answer. The building slept on, oblivious. Wiping my damp hands on my trousers, I glanced at the floor indicator panel again. Dark, lifeless, trapped between 8 and 9. The light resumed its erratic blinking, each flash etching the scene deeper into my terror. I was sealed in here with something impossible. Again, I hammered the emergency bell repeatedly. I snatched at the intercom receiver, pressing the button. Crackling static answered, punctuated by distant pops, but no coherent voice emerged. "Hello?" I whispered, the sound pitifully small. "Is anyone there?" Silence. Then, from behind me, low and muffled, as if filtered through thick velvet, came a sound that wasn't static. Laughter, deep, quiet, chillingly amused. My skin crawled. I whirled around, empty cabin, but the mirror didn't lie. The man stood there, his reflected face somehow closer than before. He wasn't visibly laughing, yet the sound persisted, a disembodied mockery. I focused on his eyes, sunken, profoundly dark, utterly devoid of life. The upturned corners of his mouth formed less a smile and more a predatory sneer. Trying to create distance, I backed away, only to collide with the rear wall. The small space felt suddenly suffocating. I stared desperately at the sealed doors, wondering about leverage, force. My fingers scrabbled at the thin seam between them, pulling with trembling arms until muscles screamed, but they wouldn't yield a fraction of an inch. My lungs burned. "Stay calm," a frantic inner voice pleaded. I risked another look at the mirror. The man's expression had shifted. His mouth hung slightly agape, revealing teeth that seemed ordinary, incongruous against his cracked, pale lips. My legs threatened to buckle. I pounded the doors again, the hollow thuds mocking my efforts. Thoughts fragmented, coalescing around a single primal urge. Out. Fresh air. A normal, blessedly empty hallway. The lights flickered, died, returned. He vanished. My own reflection stared back, wild-eyed, gasping. I instinctively brushed my shoulder, half expecting a lingering coldness, but felt only the damp fabric of my shirt. My neck was painfully stiff. A high-pitched ringing filled my ears. And then the laughter returned, closer this time, seeming to emanate from the very walls. The elevator shuddered violently, a sickening lurch as if the cables were slipping. I braced myself, nearly losing my footing. The reflection warped once more. The man reappeared. His expression was now placid, almost patient, as if waiting. Panic surged, hot and overwhelming. My mind raced, seeking any solution. I jabbed frantically at every button on the control panel, a desperate, random assault. The cabin groaned, a low mechanical whine building. Then, with a sudden, jarring lurch, it began to move. Upward. Agonizingly slow, each inch gained feeling precarious, temporary. The light steadied, ceasing its frantic blinking, though it remained dimmer than usual. For a few blessed seconds, my reflection was solitary. Then, as we crawled past the 9th floor, the shape materialized again in the mirror. Fainter now, but undeniably present. The man in the suit had retreated, standing against the back wall of the reflected elevator, his head tilted curiously. I tried to ignore him, focusing on the illuminated floor numbers, but a full-body tremor betrayed my fear. 10th floor, 11th. My heart hammered against my sternum as 12 approached. Please open. Please open. At the 12th floor, the cabin stopped with a final, solid thud. The doors slid open. I practically fell out, stumbling onto the hallway carpet, catching myself before I went down. Whirling around, I stared back into the elevator. Inside the cabin, the mirror reflected me, standing in the hallway, looking in, but the elevator itself, in that reflection, was empty. Utterly empty. The figure was gone. I stood there, gasping like a runner, the hallway blessedly silent, normally lit, the air warmer, real. I waited, breath held, expecting the doors to close. They remained open, the dim light within the cabin flickering once, twice. A hesitant step closer brought me to the threshold, but an invisible barrier of dread held me back. The thought of re-entering that space induced nausea. The laughter was gone. Then, Slowly, deliberately, the doors slid shut. I heard the machinery engage, the lift beginning its descent. I remained rooted in the hallway, gathering the frayed edges of my composure. Finally, I walked the short distance to my apartment, fumbled the key into the lock, bolted the door behind me, and let my bag drop to the floor. My shirt clung, soaked in cold sweat. My hands shook so violently it took several tries to set the key down. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection. Pale, haunted, but mercifully alone. Deep breaths gradually slowed my racing pulse. I changed into dry clothes and sank onto the sofa, straining my ears against the sudden, profound silence of the apartment, listening for any echo of that impossible sound. The urge to call someone, building maintenance, a friend, warred with the sheer absurdity of the tale. A man in the mirror. The elevator stopped. He touched me. It sounded like madness, yet the phantom pressure on my shoulder, the lingering chill, felt undeniably real. I resolved, firmly, to take the stairs come morning. That elevator was now forbidden territory. Sleep offered little respite, fragmented by dreams of silent ascending floors and corridors stretching into infinity. I woke repeatedly, drenched in sweat, convinced I'd heard that muffled laughter seeping into my bedroom, only to find silence. The next day, the 12-flight descent left me winded but grounded in reality. Safety bought with aching muscles. For the rest of the week, I religiously avoided the lift, choosing the stairwell's grueling certainty. The climb home each evening was exhausting, a physical toll, but the alternative felt infinitely worse. Still, I knew this avoidance couldn't last forever. A notice appeared in the lobby. Elevator maintenance, citing intermittent electrical faults. Corridor whispers mentioned it getting stuck on 8, conveniently blamed on a power surge. I volunteered nothing of my own experience. Explaining the spectral figure, the laughter, felt impossible, an invitation to disbelief or concern for my sanity. But the memory remains indelible. The cold, dead eyes staring from the glass, the phantom weight on my shoulder. Even now, with the lift supposedly repaired, certified safe, I find myself defaulting to the stairs most days. The fear lingers. The fear that stepping into that metal box late one night, I'll see him again. That chilling silhouette coalescing beside me, creeping closer with each ascending floor, heralded by quiet laughter as the doors refuse to open.